morning and welcome to Free Advice Friday. My name is Keri Barnum for New Shelves Books, and we are here to talk about publishing, marketing, and the business of being an author. We do go live every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and you're welcome to join us by going to newshelves.com/FAF. It's free to join us. You can ask your questions live, or you can catch the replays over on YouTube, which is New Shelves Books. And you are more than welcome to email in questions anytime for Free Advice Friday. Just send them into info@newshelves.com. We save those up and we answer them on Fridays. So we've got a couple of those emailed in questions and we are going to jump in with that. Let's see. So the first question that we have was a question about how to work with an agent as a self-published author. So if you are a self-published author, you've already published your own books and you would like to work with a literary agent to represent your books, how do you do that? The first thing is that you really need to understand what you're hoping to work with a literary agent for. For example, if you have self-published your books, a literary agent, and there are rare exceptions where a book is doing like well enough that it's got legs, but not too well that they feel like it's sold all it's going to sell. Essentially, it's hit its peak. Occasionally, very rarely, a agent or a publisher will be open to republishing a book that was self-published, but that is very rare. That was more popular, I would say, 5-10 years ago when self-publishing was taking off a little bit more. But if you are looking to work with a literary agent, that's the kind of thing we need to think about is, do you have a new book that you are putting out on sub and you would like your new book to go with an agent in a traditional publishing deal? That's when you might be able to pitch a literary agent. If you are doing a new book, but in a long running series, literary agents aren't going to want that. Publishers aren't going to want that because again, it's already kind of hit its heyday. If you have self-published books that are doing very well and you're interested in translation rights or in audio rights, you can actually pitch those yourself, or you can look for an agent who focuses on sub rights, which is translations, audio, different pieces like that. So you can work with an agent on that. So again, the first thing is to kind of really understand what you have to offer and what you're hoping a literary agent will do for you, what your partnership you're hoping will look like, because then you need to make sure that you are looking for the right literary agent. Some agents focus on subrights. Some agents really don't at all. They just take manuscripts, they put them out on sub for traditional publishing, and then they try to get subrights deals rolled into that deal, or they only do subrights for the books that they're already working with, or they even might work with another literary agent. They might actually like have someone else that works with them specifically on subrights for the books and the authors they work with. And they're all legitimate. It just depends on what their specializations in and their contacts are in. So know that. The other thing is that if you're a self-published author and you're trying to get an agent, agents and publishers will ask about your self-published books. They want to know what that brand looks like. They want to know what your sales have been like, what your audience is, how large it is, because they do consider that. There are some really great things about self-publishing first, in the sense that you already have experience, you may already have an audience built up, but it's also one of those things where agents will then want to see kind of the proof of how popular your books have been. Do people like your style of writing? Are they getting positive reviews? And if they're not getting positive reviews, if you have low ratings, if your sales are basically tanked, those are things that could actually hurt you when an agent is considering whether or not to work with you. So those are things you do need to consider. And I will say, if you go over to the New Shelves blog, I'm going to pull it up for those of you who are on the call today, but if you go over to the New Shelves blog and you search agent, it will pop up. There is an article there that was written by Amy Collins, and it's literally how do self-published authors get an agent. So we do have that article right on the blog, and I'll pop that in here in the chat for anyone who wants to see it. And then also not too long ago on Free Advice Friday, we really talked about the process of getting an agent and what the steps are. So I won't reiterate that, but I will put the YouTube replay in for anyone who wants to go visit that or save it for later. So hopefully that helps kind of explain a little bit more what it's like working with an agent and why and what you're looking for. As much as um, it maybe gets old, the comparison of it's a little bit like matchmaking. We have to kind of make sure that the agent and the author are going to get along. It is usually a long-term relationship. It is a relationship that involves money. It is a relationship that is something very personal for the author typically because they wrote this book and, authors and they're little darlings. It's, people don't say that for nothing. It's because it's true. And so sometimes authors can get very defensive when you say, hey, like this character needs to go, or, this book, like half of this needs to go. The story doesn't move it forward. I'm not an editor. Everyone who knows me knows this. Again, I don't do grammar. It's not my strong suit, and I know it. But I do work with some authors more on the editorial side of editorial editing and looking at plot lines and how things work. And I recently was working with an author where I read her manuscript and I said, big chunks. I don't care about this. And that's not me being rude. That was me saying, I, as a reader, do not care about these details and these storylines. Now, for the author, it mattered because it was part of her world. It was a scene she'd been envisioning. But as a reader, I didn't care. Meanwhile, there were details that she didn't want to include or didn't think were important. And I was saying, well, I'm confused because I don't know the backstory and I want that. So if I was your reader, I'd want you to cut this and then add that. And so that's one of the things that we just have to consider is doing that. Number one, you have to have the right style of communication for that to work and not be offensive. And you have to have a very trusting relationship. And so that often happens between agents and authors as well. You have to have the type of relationship that you're going to trust when they say, I know this doesn't make sense to you right now, just trust me, or give you hard feedback. Or again, you're dealing with money, and money is one of those business aspects and relationship aspects that can be hard to navigate. And so those are the things that we sometimes have to consider when working with an agent. I had someone say I was offered representation, but I really didn't like that person's vibe. Should I take it? It's like, probably not. If you're not loving them from the get-go, you probably don't want a long-term relationship with them. But again, just things to consider. Let's see. Last week you mentioned 2 ways to print a couple of books before going to a printer or doing an on-demand book. I cannot find my notes. Nancy, I mentioned that you could print books directly from Ingram Spark before printing. So that's one option. You can either upload your book with your ISBN and just not publish it or distribute it yet and print books, or you can upload with a non-distribute. All right. I always struggle with this word, non-distributable SKU. So that it's not on record. Essentially, there's no ISBN and you can print it that way. There's also a company called 48 Hour Books that you can print books there as well. And a lot of local printers will do that as well and do a small print run. It is more expensive per book when you go that way, just because you're not doing a large print run. So it's essentially on demand. So local printers will be a little bit more expensive usually, but those are your options. See, suppose you want an agent to turn your series into a television series. That is a great question, Pat. So if you want an agent to um, help you get your book onto film, that would typically be a sub rights agent. That's an agent specifically that focuses on sub rights. And you would want to find an agent who focuses on sub rights with a lot of success or experience in book to film. And so that's what I would be looking for. You can also, I mean, you can pitch your own book to producers and to different film people. You can create a pitch deck for your book and start doing research and that kind of stuff. And there's a website, excuse me, I'm going to look on my phone because Tell me I am not the only one, you guys, who, let's see, I currently have 59 tabs open. I use them all, but I have 59 tabs open to remind me of all the things that I'm never going to remember. There is a website called stage32.com, stage32.com. And this website is very helpful for people who are trying to pitch book ideas, TV ideas, and different things like that. So that might be something that you could look into on your own as well. You're welcome. Let's see. Let's see. I'm at a stage when I need a book cover. I have some across these cheap services. I won't name them, such, and then can you please recommend one solution for a business book? So this is important to note. When working with cover designers, they don't all specialize in everything. Just like you as an author don't necessarily write fiction and nonfiction, or you don't write historical fiction and books on business. Neither do cover designers necessarily work or excel at all cover design. So there are some companies I love, absolutely love and adore for fantasy, for romance, for historical fiction that I would never recommend for a business book. And so that is important to note as well, that some people kind of specialize in different things, and also look at the covers that they've put out. If they don't have a cover that you're going, that's kind of what my book is, or that's the vibe I want for my book, they're probably not specializing in what you want. So I would steer clear of those. So if you were looking for a non-fiction business book cover designer, let me go over to, by the way, if you've never been, if you go to newshelves.com and go to resources, there's a page called People We Like. And it is just companies and people that we have either used, worked with, seen their work, that we think that they do a good job. And so we put them on the People We Like page. Some of them probably don't even know they're on there, but they're on there. So let me go to that page. So I dropped the people we like tab in the Zoom chat here. And on the people we like page, I have a list of book editing, copy designers, goodness, book cover designers. And so if I was looking for a non-fiction business book, I personally think I would be going to, actually, first, let me show you the page. I'll share my screen. You guys know me. Um, I'll try to share my screen anyway, right? All right, here's my screen. So this is the People We Like page. You all have access to it. It's free. And so when you go on the People We Like page, you can see there are these categories for book editing, interior book design resources, book cover design, book marketing, publicity, full service design, author websites, audiobook production, all of these other things. So I just put people that provide services that I've been pleased with in the past on here. And so you're welcome to check that out anytime. So going to book cover design, because when people ask me for recommendations, this is what I do. I go, who on my list do I think is great for what? Shane Watson does illustration, beautiful illustration for children's book. Demonza does really good with fiction. They do good with thrillers, historical fiction, that kind of thing. Deranged Doctor Design, also strong in fiction. They do a lot of romance covers that are strong. I'd say probably fantasy and sci-fi also. 99 Designs is just a design website where you can look for cover designers. It's kind of like Fiverr, but for design. So sometimes I'll look up people there. Mila does fantastic covers. I've used her for several nonfiction covers. So Mila Graphics, and her website's milagraphicartist.com. Self-pub covers, that's where you're kind of doing your own a little bit, which is fine, but that's probably not what you're looking for a business book. The book cover whisper again does good design. That might be a fit for nonfiction. GKS Creative does excellent nonfiction design. So that's Gwen over at GKS Creative. I'd recommend that one. Miblart, I love for fantasy, sci-fi, some romance, but more in the fiction arena. Bright Light Graphics does some nonfiction design as well. That's Leva over at Bright Light Graphics. And then Carl, I believe, does more children's books. So that's kind of my go-to list. And you can access this, just go to newshelves.com. And then you can either go to the resource tab and people we like tab, or you can go direct to the website that I dropped in. You're welcome. Let's see. Mm. Historical fiction is one of those that's a little difficult in the sense of who you're finding to do your covers with, because historical fiction typically falls into one of two categories. I call them bodice rippers. Historical fiction that is romance, historical fiction, and then there's historical fiction that focuses more on the history and the storyline. And Victoria, I know that's more of your book. And so I've worked with uh, Chris Bennett, who's on the call, has historical fiction series. He's just about to release a book one in a new series for The Road to Revolution, and that's about the Revolutionary War. And that one, we've done all of his covers with Demonza, and they've done a good job. So I think that with any of these, you have to have a clear idea of what you want. And you need to be a really good communicator at telling them what you want. If you're just going to someone and saying, I just want some concepts, you're either going to pay a lot more or have a lot less success than if you go with a strong concept in mind. So I like to go with a strong concept. I like to go and look at other covers that are currently trending or selling and find two or three where I can say, I would like something similar to this or in this design range, but with this. The more that you can give information, that's not to say you're dictating every little move. As I said, I'm not an artist. I am not good at that. I'm not. I'm really good at critiquing book covers, and I'm really good at saying, oh, well, if we switch this or here or move this, I'm really good at that. The design process, like if someone if I was like, do this color scheme and do this and this, it's going to turn out terrible because I don't have an eye for it. And I found out recently, I forget what it's called, but there's this thing, and it's ironic because I work with books. There's this thing when people envision things, some people actually paint a picture in their head. So if you're reading a book, you paint a picture in your head, and that it like plays out almost like a movie, and you can see detail and information. I do not have this. I see words in my head. And so when I read a book, people like sometimes are like, they feel like they have to like tell you all about the character. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really care because I don't see them in my mind's eye. Ask me. I just had to pull up photos that were I was trying to find photos that were in relation to a book I just read. I couldn't tell you what the main character looked like, not even kind of. I could tell you she rode a motorcycle and she had tattoos and she had piercings. What color hair she have? I have no clue. I'm sure it was put in there a couple times. Eyes, she has them. What color are they? I have no clue because it's just something that my mind does not think that way. My mind thinks in words. So I have a very hard time envisioning things. This makes me a terrible person to be telling people what font or color to use. Now, once I can see it, I can give feedback on it. So know which one you are. Make sure that you're giving enough information to guide the design in a way that you want, but also you have to be brave enough to allow the designer to use their skills to actually design. Also, do your research, know what's currently trending, know what books are coming out the next year in your genre, know what's currently selling and popular, because I have also seen authors who have given direction for their cover design that's actually hurt them because they're not a designer and they did what they like versus what's popular and selling. And there have been a couple times, I mean, when people and authors and publishers work with me and they ask for my opinion, and sometimes when they don't ask, I give them my opinion on the cover design. Um, and I will tell them, yeah, I think it needs this or that. And sometimes an author will say, well, I don't like that. And I usually have the hard conversation of, okay, I don't want you to hate your cover, but I also want your reader to love it more than you. Or I want them to love it at least as much as you. Does it fit in? Does it have all those elements it needs? And sometimes the author is like, all right, I understand. And sometimes they are just digging in their heels. They want the cover design that they love. And I've seen it hurt sales and I've seen it hurt opportunities. So we have to consider that as well. It goes back to kind of our books being our darlings and the idea that we have to be open to the fact that, I think I've said it here before. Oh, great. You love that design. You love that photo. You love this piece of art that you drew for your cover. Great. I love that. Print it off and hang it on your wall and then get a book cover that fits your book and the genre that it's in. It's not meant to be a piece of art necessarily. It's meant to be a marketing piece that draws the right reader to you. And then Muriel's saying a tip from a designer. I always ask what they don't want because people often know what they don't want, even if they don't know what they do want. And that is an excellent tip as well. When working with authors on cover design, I usually ask a series of questions. I will pull up some comp titles and books and I'll say, okay, what do you think of this one? What do you like? What don't you like? Because again, I'm visual. I need that. I will ask them questions like, are there any colors that you really like or you hate? What are your brand colors if you're a business? Do you like this kind of design or this kind of design? Because by doing that, you can kind of get a sense and almost always there's something where people are like, it's really weird, but I hate red. I'm like, okay, I would have never guessed that. And since you have a business book, the chances that red would end up on your business book are pretty high. So we're gonna steer clear about that. How do you feel about orange? And so those are definitely the things. And a good designer will help walk you through that. But I will also say some designers are good designers and they're not fantastic communicators either. So again, it comes back down to communication. I work with a lot of authors literally as the between them and the designer to make sure that they're both winning because sometimes they're just not talking the same language. And so that's important too. It's really important to kind of find a designer you can work with well, but also to trust your designer. If they give you an idea and you're like, I'm not so sure about that. Well, you're not a no, so maybe you should let them try it and see how it works out. And your cover is your most important marketing piece. And if you're off the mark, it's going to hurt you. So that's something to consider as well. All right, Jane had a question back on about bios, and let me see. Jane's question slash thoughts from Jane on a Friday. Author bios seem to follow a predictable pattern, mentioning coffee consumption, love of pets, favorite hobbies, resulting in a cliche, overly perky tone. Just her opinion. How would you suggest crafting a more nuanced, authentic author bio that still feels inviting but avoids tired tropes? Unless tired tropes are a good thing in a bio. I need one for her upcoming book, which her upcoming book has an amazing cover. She shared it with me. I think it was this week. The days are running together, to be honest. Beautiful cover, Jane. I'm very excited for the Widow's Walk. And so we need something professional yet engaging. So here's the thing with bios. Your bio as an author will be different for the different ways that you use it. Sometimes your author bio will be the same whether you write fiction or nonfiction, whether it's your business bio or not, but not usually. Very often, a author will have multiple bios. They will have a bio that is professional. It's about their writing, their education, and those types of things. And then an author will have a bio that goes in their book. That's typically a little bit more short and sweet, focuses more on their writing. And then you have what I would call your social bio, your social media, your website. They're all versions of the same thing. And I have them too in the business of publishing and marketing and publicity. I also have multiple bios. I have the bios that I share on social media about how I have a dog and kids and blah, blah, blah. No one cares about that when they're looking to hire me or see what my qualifications are. So does that typically get included in my business stuff? No. So know that you're going to change your bio for different places. Number one. Number two, the other thing is that if we are too strictly business, we seem unfriendly and unapproachable. So that's why you get a lot of people talking about their coffee, or they just have a serious problem with coffee, which is me. And bacon. Coffee and bacon are my kryptonite. Um, and sometimes pets are featured heavily in their book. For example, cozy mystery authors, I don't know that there have ever been studies. In my personal experience, if a cozy mystery features a animal on the cover, it is easier to sell. It is easier to sell. If a book features a pet and they talk about it in the description, it's easier to sell. And I think I would even go so far to say that readers trust a author who loves dogs or cats more if they're in the cozy mystery space. It's just true, in my opinion, which is right. But anyway, so I think that's one of the funny things. And so maybe sometimes those things are being included really purposefully. For you, that may not be the case. So I think it's one of those things where you want to add in your accomplishments, but make sure that we are keeping the accomplishments and the information connected to that current book. So, for example, if I'm writing a book on historical fiction, I can talk about how I was absolutely obsessed with history when I was a child. And my favorite Christmas gifts were nonfiction historical books that are like yay big. True story. And that would apply. It makes sense for historical fiction. What I'm not going to tell them is that I danced ballet for 16 years because it has nothing to do with that. And you likewise will need to make adjustments because Jane, for example, I know is a member of the clergy. And so that may play a part in your book, or it may be something that fades to the background with your writing at the moment. So these are the things we consider is just because you have amazing qualifications does not mean they always need to be highlighted. When I don't know, when I'm putting my name in for working with the local PTSA, they don't care what my business accomplishments are, unless I can say I'm really good at managing finances and I've done many fundraisers, then they care. So we either have to apply our qualifications to our book and to our audience, or even though it may hurt you because you're like, I earned that qualification, fantastic, leave it out or minimize it. Not to minimize yourself, but to highlight what's important to your authors or your readers at the moment. So for example, we have Jane's bio and I'll read it out. Jane Willen is the accomplished author behind the beloved Sister Agatha and Father Sulwin. I always struggle with that mystery series. Jane's love for storytelling and her deep faith have been the driving force behind her successful career as a writer and pastor. Now, I really do love what you did here, Jane, where you mentioned your other books, because if you're writing kind of to the same audience or people, it makes sense that you highlight your other books. Those are the qualifications they care about, and those are the things they might go over for. I also like how you worked in that you have a faith theme in many of your books. And you just kind of mentioned your successful career as a writer and pastor. You didn't go on to say where you went to school for and all of those things. You kind of left it out, which I think was smart. Jane has always been fascinated by the intricate workings of church life and the diverse personalities that make up a congregation. This interest, combined with her passion for cozy mysteries, inspired her to create the charming characters of Sister Agatha and Father. I'm just going to skip it. I'm sorry. I'm not the best today. Solwyn. I think I butchered that. Anyway, I'm obviously not narrating any books anytime soon. Have patience with me. When she's not writing her next novel or trending or tending to her pastoral duties, Jane finds joy in exploring the great outdoors. Along with her husband, Don, she embarks on biking and hiking adventures. At home, Jane is surrounded by the love of her two rescue pets, Ollie, a charming chihuahua, and Winifred, an affectionate cat. Selwyn. I'm going to have to like cement that in my mind, Jane. Thank you. All right. So I think this is good. I will say that the middle part where you talk about the intricate workings of church life, to me, that applies to your next Sister Agatha book. Does it apply to The Widow's Walk? I don't know. You do focus more on kind of that other series. And so I would say if I had to cut something, it would be that middle part. I think it definitely applies to Sister Agatha. Does it apply to The Widow's Walk? I don't know. Is there something more innate in that book that makes sense? And if so, I would include it. So, for example, this interest combined with her passion for cozy mysteries inspired both her charming, both it inspired her to create the charming characters of Sister Agatha and Father Selwyn, and something connected to the current book. So remember that these people just read The Widow's Walk. So make sure that you are highlighting The Widow's Walk because that's the book they just read. That's the insider scoop they want, not necessarily your other series. So make sure that you focus on that for that book. And that's what I mean by sometimes your bio is going to be different. And it is relatable because you do have rescue pets. I was watching last night, and was it last night? It was last night. Again, my timeline this week is off. I was watching last night the new Matlock series. I don't know if any of you have seen it. I think it's on, is it on? I'm not gonna guess what it's on because I didn't turn the TV on. I just watched the program. But so I was watching the new Matlock series, and it was kind of funny that the main character was trying to get a favor. And she was realizing that as trying to get this favor, that she needed to know what was important to the different people she was trying to get favors from in order to relate to them. So this other character in the story is kind of like a no nonsense business manager, my rules, whatever. And then the main character realizes that she's really into her pets and rescue pets. And so she just casually throws out her rescue pet. And suddenly this other, hard edge business manager turns it around. It's like, oh, honey, let's like essentially, what can I do for you? Like, you're my people. Readers do that too. They want to find their people. And whether that be the person who bakes or that has rescue pets or that is a dog person and doesn't get cat people or is a coffee drinker, we feel like we met our people. And that is why people throw that information in there. And so while it might seem a little cliche or overly perky sometimes, that's might be how those people are. Maybe those people are high energy people. And that doesn't mean you have to be, but that's why sometimes I think we see it in there is we want to find our people. It's like a dating profile almost where we're trying to put in like the information about ourselves that is both pertinent, but also relatable. So if you don't want to talk about coffee, don't do it. If you, if your focus is more on adventure and family and relationships within the church, then you focus on that. And if your readers are loving your books, or if they love that, they're going to love your books, then you've done your job, I think, in your bio. So think of those things. And of course, I know we mentioned last week that you'll have different length bios as well. You'll have your super short bio, you will have like a tag bio, a longer bio, a really long bio, and you'll pull them out for different things, and that's okay as well. It's just like when we meet people, we don't always show the same side or all sides of ourselves. There are people that, I just met and I'm nice and I'm happy and I'm outgoing. I don't show them the me that is like, man, I'm not moving from my couch and I'm rotting here reading on a Saturday because that's just not applicable at the moment. We don't know each other that well. And that's okay. It doesn't make it any less genuine. It just means that you're not quite there with them yet, or they don't need to know it. And that's okay too. I'd venture to say that most of us, people we work with, don't know everything our best friends know. Only the people that you send Facebook reels to at 2 a.m. truly know those weird sides of you, and that's okay. So that's my best advice. I think you've got a great start there. Just remember, tie it into your current book that you're promoting, that you're working on. So that is highlighted as well, because sometimes your bio is used not just on your back cover, but it'll be used on the publisher website. It'll be used in different ways, or people will lift it for interviews. And so you want to make sure that you highlight your current book as well. All right. Just a comment. When I talked to someone from a hybrid publishing house, she wasn't familiar with a CPIC. In follow-up, I emailed her the link and an excerpt from her new show's blog post on it. While we get informed, publishers too need to be informed. Yes, that is true. So this is one of those things that I don't know actually, I wouldn't even say most of you. I would say a good portion of you are authors on this call. Some are traditionally published, some are traditionally published, some hybrid, and some self-published. I think that self-published authors tend to be the authors that are most diligent in learning about the industry because they're doing everything on their own and they have to. I also have, however, worked with a number of traditionally published authors who focus on writing craft. And then I work with them on marketing, or they follow me, we chat about marketing because they want to keep their sales up. But I also actually work with a number of publishers, both large and small. I work with the publishers on best practices for books, for marketing, publicity, and that kind of thing. And part of that is because when you get a larger publisher, what often happens is you have a lot of people running individual pieces. But what you don't always have is overall education on the publishing industry. Take that one. How many people work at a publishing house and they do edits, but they don't follow the overall publishing industry? They're not reading all the information about sales and marketing and everything all the time. Now, should they have a grasp of it? I think so, because that kind of thing can influence design, for example, can be influenced by what's trending in publishing, what's allowed, what's not allowed, what's getting banned, what's not getting banned. So these are really important things. But when you have a large publishing company, people tend to focus more on their task, not on the industry as a whole. And a really good publisher will make sure that there's some education out there, but there's not always stuff in between. And when you have even a publisher that's maybe smaller, but it's a hybrid or small press where they're doing a lot of the jobs, sometimes they know what they know and they're not focused on education because they don't have the time or it's not their priority, whatever it may be. So that's something that's true as well. And that is why sometimes I have publishers who say, hey, we can't train everybody. We just can't. We can't train everybody. We don't have the time, the resources. We're just going to have you come in, look at our stuff, consult with us, and tell us what we're not current on. True story. I have larger publishers who are like, yep, we just want to have an hour call with you here and there so that you can come in and tell us how we're outdated. Cool with me. I love doing that. I have publishers who are like, yeah, no, we just do what we do and we don't care if we're out of date. We'll eventually update it. And when we do, we'll just do all the updates from the last 5 years and get current. With the way publishing is moving and how quickly it's moving, that means that those publishers, they're kind of really out of date. And sometimes they don't know things. Now, I will also say there are many small presses and hybrid publishers who are dedicated to knowing what's happening in the market, to education, who are reading all the newsletters and things that I am as well. But it's a job. I mean, that is why people pay me to consult with them or to look things over, is because I'm doing that. I am reading all the newsletters. I am looking at the information. I am looking at sales trends, and not everyone can do that. Authors can't necessarily do that and write, which is why I work with authors who are like, hey, I just want to write. And if there's something I need to know, just let me know. Or they come to Free Advice Friday because they're like, I just need the highlight reel. And again, that's perfectly cool with me. So that is sometimes true. And not all publishers, libraries are kind of a very large but niche market, and not all publishers are very educated on them, whether it be a large or small publisher. Let's see, what is the value of joining writers associations like Mystery Writers of America? There are a couple of benefits for writers or publishers associations. Usually they offer some type of training or webinars or informative sessions with their subscription's not the right word. I can't even think of it. Membership. So for example, IBPA does training webinars like every month, I think, that are free. They have discounted programming for like getting into Publishers Weekly for an ad and different things like that. So they have that. They have, I believe they still do a weekly roundtable where it's like an open Zoom once a week where people can go in. You're talking on a specific topic about publishing and things like that. So that's valuable. Mystery Writers of America, I believe, does the same thing where they have different trainings. Sometimes they have opportunities for collaboration or discounted advertising. And then it's a community and support if you're looking for someone to write with or a beta reader or things like that. Sometimes you can go right to that community and ask and get help. And then there's places like Authors Guild, and Authors Guild does trainings. They have like educational pieces to their membership, but they also have with Authors Guild, like they actually help, like if you need mediation, I believe even legal help for certain things, like you're having issues, then they step in and do that. So your membership covers help. They look over, I know Ally does, the Alliance of Independent Authors does, and Authors Guild will look over contracts for you. So like if you are a indie author who got a deal for sub rights, but you don't have an agent, they will look over contracts for you, I believe. So those are really helpful resources. I've even told people like, oh, you got a deal? Go join these two organizations so you can use these benefits. Even if it's the only year you ever do it, it's going to be helpful and less frustrating than just trying to find someone. Just because a lawyer is a lawyer doesn't mean that they specialize in contracts or they know much about subrights contracts or book contracts. So that can be very helpful as well. It depends on what the organization is, what your needs are, and honestly, it also depends on how much you're going to use it. If you buy a tool, whether it be a marketing tool or a subscription or whatever it is, if you buy a tool and you don't use it, that doesn't mean it's a bad tool. It means you didn't use the tool. So if you are not going to take the time to listen to trainings or use these resources, it's not going to be very valuable for you. That doesn't mean it's not a valuable program. So those are things to consider as well. It's very easy to buy things, but to commit the time to use them is a little bit different. So are you going to commit to use them or not? And if so, they can be very valuable. If not, I mean, why buy something you're not going to use, right? I think that is one of the things that subscriptions, like one of those things where we have these subscriptions all over where it's like, oh, we have this one and this one. And there are companies and programs that some are free, some you pay, but you put in your information and they find your subscriptions everywhere. So you can manage all of your subscriptions in one spot. And I just saw something, it was on a finance thing, about like how much the average person would save if they actually got rid of the subscriptions they don't use. And it was quite a bit of money because think about how many, you signed up for this for free and then it just kept taking $5 a month out and you never thought about it. So it's kind of like that. If you don't use it, then why have it? Let's see. I wanted to touch just very briefly. If you work with Ingram Spark or have an Ingram Spark account, they recently sent out a service alert saying that the European European Union has a regulation that will go into effect on December 13th, 2024, entitled the General Product Safety Regulation, GPSR. The GPSR establishes requirements related to a product's design, manufacture, and placement to help ensure products do not pose a risk to consumers. This applies to all products, including books that are imported or made available within the EU. Authors, publishers, and manufacturers, suppliers, distributors, and wholesalers will all be affected by this new regulation. If you've gotten this email and you've been a little worried or scared, you are not alone. This is worded in such a way that it sounds like, hey, fix this or you're going to jail. Guys, I have to say, I am following up on this and I am looking into it even more. But the manufacturer is Ingram Spark. So Ingram Spark will be providing the product safety information and labeling to comply with GPSR. We don't really need to do anything unless your book is harmful in some way, which I can't imagine most of them are. Of course, do your due diligence if you think there's something wrong. But I will also tell you that Ingram Spark will probably highlight any books that have a problem for some reason. They will be adding as the manufacturer the information needed. So most people, you should be aware of this. You should be looking for any alert emails specific to your books in case they do reach out to you. Most people don't need to worry about this, nor do they need to do anything or change anything. So just keep that in mind. I know emails like that, while they're just meant to be informative, they have to cover their bases. They can sound kind of scary. This is not something we really need to worry about, in my opinion. I'll keep you updated if I hear of anything that actually means you have to go in and change things. But for the most part, just keep an eye on your account. If one of your books gets highlighted or they say there's an issue with a specific product that you're offering, that's when you'll want to pay attention. But for the most part, I think we'll all be just fine. See, and the last thing I wanted to cover, we do have a couple more minutes, so if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. But the last thing I wanted to cover was just more information on audiobook sales. So this week, HarperCollins CEO, who is Brian Murray, discussed the growth of audio and the success of the company and the book business as a whole. And so we are seeing, Murray actually said, audiobooks have eclipsed ebook sales for the publisher, in part due to the growth of listeners using Spotify and Audible. While previously audiobook listeners were very committed to the format and used Audible, Spotify was able to target more occasional audiobook listeners who are already using the platform for music and podcast. Quote, we now know a year later that entry strategy has been very successful for Spotify, and as a result, we kind of get a little bit of an incremental growth in our business in total, Ray said. So I love this. I called it a year ago, but I think it's just fantastic to see that Spotify isn't taking away from Audible, and Spotify is doing what I said it would do. And that is that they are targeting people who are already listening to podcasts to music on Spotify often, and they're bringing in more revenue for the audiobook market. And I adore this because I think it's not just shifting the sales market for books and audiobooks. I think it's truly bringing in new people in a new market. And whenever that happens, we expand our market and our potential. So I absolutely adore that we're seeing some growth and some use on Spotify, and we're seeing some sales for audiobooks on Spotify, certainly with bigger publishers. I've seen it with some of my indies as well, probably not on that scale, but also marketing is also very different there. And even the deals and revenues are different for larger companies. But I think that it is one of those things that's been great. And then there is, of course, so much still going on about AI translations and text to speech. And that's still being explored, but overwhelmingly, I would say that there are a lot of people. There are two types of people. There are people who don't really care who reads their book, AI or otherwise. And then there are people who just hate it and aren't going to touch it, either on their moral compass or because they don't like the way it sounds. Both are valid, doesn't matter to me. But I think we're still seeing that play out. And there's a lot of, just AI technology and usage that's being played with in the market from big publishers, audiobooks, translations, and all of that, because we are seeing that happen with some of the larger publishing companies exploring AI in their markets. And the truth is that AI is here. AI is not going away. AI is developing. And so the smart publishers are going to be the one who, rather than bury their head in the sands, realize that and get ahead of it and kind of decide how they're going to use it or let it be used within their business. They're going to explore it so they know how they don't want to use it as much as they do. So I think that's something important to note. But overall, audiobooks are doing awesome and I love it. I've often talked about how my husband is, the man has not like read a physical book in a really long time, but he listens to audiobooks like nobody's business. He's also super, super smart because he listens to podcasts and audiobooks like all the time. And unlike me, who I'm like, oh, I'm reading a book. And people are like, what are you reading? And I'm like, well, it's this fantasy about blah, blah, blah. He listens to like smart things like, how engines work and stuff like that. I don't because I have him to give me the cliff notes, but I think it's fantastic that there are markets that are noticing that there are people who are listening to things nonstop. And if they're listening to podcasts, they're probably open to listening to audiobooks, but they're on places like Spotify, not so much places like Audible. So I think that's a great thing for the market. I love to see the market grow and I love to see people exploring and finding books in a new way that they haven't before, not in a bookstore, not at a library, not someone who's technically would dub themselves a reader, is finding and exploring books because that expands our market and opportunity. And I really love to see that. So, all right, you guys, that's been Friday. That's a wrap. Thank you for being here. We will be back next Friday, which is going to be the 20th, same time, same place. If you have questions, again, you can always email them anytime to info@newshelves.com. You can just put question for Friday or free advice Fridays in the subject line. I save those up and I will answer them next Friday. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay warm, stay safe, and I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.